According to the American Psychological Association, up to 82% of people face feelings of impostor phenomenon, struggling with the sense they haven't earned what they've achieved and are a fraud, according to the Journal of General Internal Medicine. Barbara Churchill is a confidence and leadership coach for high-achieving professional women. Through her Lead It Real confidence coaching program, she helps leaders and entrepreneurs break through the blocks and own their power so that they can create the career and life which they crave. Barbara has been mentoring leading career professionals for over 25 years, and she has a wealth of knowledge on how to stir the pot and get leaders to think outside the box in order to achieve their own version of prosperity. And she joined me this week to share just a little of that wisdom. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. A moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn about your personal and professional journey. It's delightful to be with you this morning or this afternoon, and thank you for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, absolutely. Barbara, you tell me that imposter syndrome has been a big part of your life and a life of the people that you interact with, and you know it has a tendency to sort of derail dreams. So I'm wondering if you can tell me all about how you've dealt with it to get where you are today.
I would love to share that. You know, it's funny because as long as I can remember, I have been a high achiever. It was just part of, what was expected in my house growing up. You got to do your homework, you got to get good grades, get a job, be a leader, all of that stuff. And that's what happens with so many high achievers. We start to have this self-doubt, but it isn't just regular self-doubt. It is you're doubting your competence and you compare yourself to other people. So, while I was growing up and doing all of the things, doing everything right, that I thought I was supposed to do, what I really wanted to focus on were the arts, music and acting, maybe even painting or something. And I had a couple of teachers in my life. I think they were like middle school teachers. And my art teacher in particular, because I couldn't, make a bowl of fruit look 3D on my flat piece of paper. And she told me that I wasn't very creative. And I took that one comment by a professional who I thought was an expert, and I parlayed that into most of my entire life, thinking about, well, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Well, my art teacher said I wasn't creative, and you got to be creative to be a school teacher. So I just took that off the table for myself. I was a really good piano player, and I could play music by ear, and it was so fun for me, and it brought me a lot of joy. But in my house, what was valued were more business skills, right? And music was looked at as kind of extracurricular. So that kind of went out the window as well. I had to focus on what was told to me was, this is where you need to go, instead of trusting my own instincts and, going after it. So when I was in college and afterwards, I really had some serious doubts about my abilities and all of these areas because I transferred that one comment. It's amazing what our brains will do. And so imposter syndrome teaches us in our brains, hey, diminish your skills. You're really not as good as you think you are. You're going to get found out, right? And it used to be called impostor phenomenon by the two women that coined the phrase and did all this research with high achieving women in particular. Their names are Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. Last name spelled IMES. And there were two psychologists from Georgia State University. And they observed students and those academically who excelled. And they saw that at the core, imposter syndrome refers to people who have this persistent belief that they either lack intelligence or the right skills or the competence. And so they're convinced that, they get praise, they're just lucky, or, they don't really deserve it, or they chalk it up to, charm, or, hey, the connections that they had or anything like that. So that's kind of been my thing. I've been very successful, and I have kind of diminished that success, chalking it up to, well, I had a good team, or, I was just in the right place at the right time, those kinds of things. So it is my desire in life to help people undo all of that programming that we get as kids, not just from parents. I'm not blaming parents, but our society and this compare and despair. You have to always be on top, and it really is a dream stealer. When you're a little kid and you fantasize about doing something, but then you're told, no, you can't, you kind of start to believe in that, and you shortchange yourself. Right. So for me, it took a long time to just go, wait a second, I'm really good at certain things, and I'm going to utilize those things and own those things. And that's what I do with my clients, is to really look at what you're good at, what you enjoy, step into that and own it. And it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. Barbara, I was going to share just a quick story. So I was actually born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. And I found out at 9 years old that I wouldn't be able to walk. I remember that the doctor had taken myself and my parents into a conference room, and she basically said, we've done everything we can do for you medically, and you'll have to use devices to get around. And then the next day I had to go back to school, and I credit sort of the aha moment in my life. I didn't know it at the time, but I was 9 years old, right? So I credit my middle school principal. Her name was Dr. Carol Crewley, and she looked at me after I had told her the story, and she had every person in my assigned to my file in her office the next day, because she knew I was coming back from the hospital. And she looked at me and she said, the only limitations in your life will be the artificial ones that you place on yourself. And I really think that skyrocketed myself in the way I live my life. So my next question after sharing that story with you is, how do you think leadership and building confidence are interconnected?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I adore that principle.
Because she was a great woman, that's for sure. Yeah.
If we would have had, if we have more of those people in our world, just think of what we can do when just one person shows that they believe in you, right? And that leads right into leadership, because confidence and leadership are definitely intertwined. People want to follow a confident leader. We've all had bosses, or perhaps we've been a boss who we kind of didn't know where we were going. We didn't have a vision, or they just didn't know how to lead, and you kind of feel like you're in no man's land. You're wandering around. You're not sure what to do. And it's frustrating. So we want leaders who have a vision and can articulate that well, paint a really vivid picture, inspire people like that principle, and believe in people, and then get buy-in into that vision. I also think that someone who is self-confident, there's a difference between confidence and self-confidence, but somebody who is really self-confident as a leader, who has their own back and believes in themselves, that is so attractive. People are drawn to that, and they may not be able to articulate why, But that is magnetism. When you walk into a room and you are a self-confident person, we've all been in those rooms where somebody walks in and just owns the room and you're like, whoa, who is that? Right? So that is super important. And the other piece of being self-confident is knowing that as a leader, you can show vulnerability. I know Brene Brown talks about this all the time. It's so true. The best leaders are the ones that are comfortable enough to show vulnerability. They know that it doesn't take away any of their confidence or influence in their as a leader. And that piece, showing vulnerability, shows your employees that you're human, that you understand. That, and they can relate to you more for sure. When you're in that spin of self-doubt and you aren't feeling particularly confident, you're not making great decisions. And that can be costly for your team. It can be costly for the organization. And it certainly is costly for yourself,
Yeah, absolutely. And, Barbara, I'm a big believer in celebrating the wins in life and celebrating the big and the small wins. And I think that's a big way to build confidence on a consistent basis. So I'm curious to ask you your keys to sort of building confidence on a consistent basis, because I also look at that as like building a house, right? If you don't have a strong foundation, you can't build confidence. So talk to me about building confidence on a consistent basis and the keys there, in your opinion.
Yeah, I love that question. Well, I think, I mentioned earlier, there's a distinction between confidence and self-confidence. And I think sometimes we just throw them all in the same pot. Confidence can come from doing something well. So if you're a good tennis player or golfer, or if you're a professional speaker, or if, you make your pasta sauce really great every single time, those are skill sets that, go with each of those things. And when you do them well, you feel confident. If I said, to someone, hey, do you think you can, use a fork and do that successfully? They'll be like, of course I can. Right. So self-confidence, however, is about your belief in yourself. No matter what happens in your world, it's your belief in your capacity to deal with it and get on the other side of it. Even when you fail, because really, let's face it, Kevin, you know what? We fail, and it's okay to fail. And I think our society has set us up in a way that failure is, there's no way. But you know what? Experimentation. When you're a scientist, you have how many experiments, do you do that don't work out, and then you get that one that works. Failure to me is just like experiments. You just keep trying and throw something else against the wall. Let's see if it sticks. But because our society says failure isn't good, and they only really look at those people who are super successful, and we really are into this whole, instant success, instant fame, all of that. It really, if you're somebody who's up and coming, it's really like, what do I have to do to be a success? So self-confidence to me is all about your belief in yourself. And so this is all about mindset. It's all about that self-talk that we have in our brains. And our brains are programmed to notice negative things. So it really takes effort. It takes a decision to say, hey, I'm going to be confident. I'm going to be self-confident. I'm going to speak to myself the way I would speak to someone else, to the way I would speak to my best friend, right? So what you think creates how you feel. If you're in a funk, I invite you to go, okay, well, what am I thinking? Because if I'm feeling down or I'm feeling, sad, what am I thinking? Because that's what's creating everything that you feel is your thoughts. And that's not something that is my opinion. That comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's a whole thing. But once you can shift that self-doubt thinking, then you get to decide what thoughts are going to be useful and begin to practice them. And I take my clients through that. I love that you love to celebrate wins, because of the way our brains are, we immediately look at what's not working well, right? We did something. How often do we achieve something and they go, okay, that was great, next, We don't even sit in the celebration of it because we expect ourselves to get to the next level right away. So we always start our sessions with a celebration, what went really well. I don't care how big or small it is, but it sets the tone and it shifts your brain into thinking of something positive. Then you get to practice this change in your habitual thinking. And it really does take practice. You know, people use mantras every single day. That's a practice for what's happening in your brain. Instead of using that old habitual thinking that keeps you stuck and keeps you at that level and you want to move forward, start practicing things that are going to get you to that space. You have to start to believe kind of ahead of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Barbara, now I want to talk to you about women's empowerment because I know that you help professional women and other leaders and entrepreneurs through your coaching company called Lead It Real, where you help them sort of get through those blocks. So, tell me what women's empowerment means to you and all the good work that you do.
Well, I appreciate that. Yes, I work with all types of leaders. My sweet spot, of course, is women because I want to see them get to the highest levels. So to me, coaching is such a powerful investment in yourself. You know, and in my program, first we do a 90-minute foundation call to discuss. I have them take an assessment and we discuss that. And then we set the stage for the next 6 months that we're going to spend together. And we choose up to 3 focus areas that they want to focus on. Coaching isn't about fixing because there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. We're just going to make some shifts in how you think and how you show up. So I tell my clients that we're going to slow way down so that we get to speed up later on. And as you can imagine, Kevin, high achievers are not really warming up to that idea very soon, right? Because they're like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Let's go faster. But we all have these habitual behaviors that hold us back and keep us playing small. And women in particular, this is why imposter syndrome has been such a big thing for me, because those are the behaviors and thoughts that hold people back. And this is about safety. I create a safe space for them to say what's really on their mind, to share what's happening in their world. And our primitive brains, you know, that whole fight, flight, or freeze thing, that's still what's kind of in charge in a lot of decisions that we're making. And that's just about keeping us safe. So I teach them this concept that I created about certain behaviors that hold them back. And I call them the 4 derailers because they derail your behavior to get you to where you want to go. They're derailing your road to success. And they are perfectionism, procrastination, proving, and people pleasing. And women in particular have a difficult time owning their expertise and talents. They give credit to their teams for, you know, or that they were lucky, or, you know, they just happened to be at the right place. And rarely do they own their part of their success. And again, that's, you know, that's the imposter syndrome. So I help them make those shifts in their thinking, and I recognize the role that they played in their career successes. You know, we have to own what we have accomplished, and that's okay. Women are told not to brag and not to get too big, right? And no, you know what? I want everybody, I don't care who you are, I want you to get as bold and big and brave as you are meant to be. So I help them say these things out loud, own their expertise, own their seat at the leadership table, right? And they belong there, you know, they really do. It's not fluke. It's not just luck. They earned it, and they need to feel that accomplishment and pride and self-confidence. So that's what we work on.
Absolutely. And, you know, Barbara, one of my main passions outside of hosting this podcast is helping individuals with disabilities find and maintain employment. And, you know, October is a National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you define diversity, equity, and inclusion for all, and how do you think we can get more individuals with disabilities infused into the workforce?
Well, again, I think this is such a great question. And I got to be honest with you, Kevin, I don't have my own specific definition. And this may sound really naive, but I really believe in giving everybody the opportunity to contribute and have a job, where they feel valued and they get to do good work. So I do know that top companies who include people with disabilities in their DE&I initiatives have I looked this up on the Department of Labor Office of Disability Employment. They have a 28% higher revenue. They double the net income, and they have a 30% higher economic profit margin. I mean, come on, right? So I do think that sometimes, and I'm not bashing HR departments, but I do think sometimes DE&I can become a checklist item. And they'll have, here we've done this video. Hey, we had this training. Boom, we are practicing, DE&I. I think it has to go much deeper than that. It has to become part of the culture. And that starts with leadership, and it has to trickle down top up. You cannot have a successful, in my opinion, you can't have a successful initiative if the top leaders do not buy into it. I mean, think about, this is a fascinating conversation. Think about all the inventions that were brought to us either by a disability, an inventor who was disabled, or because there was a need in the community of disabled people, right? Fidget spinners. Those are the newest things. I have 2 sons with ADHD. They love their fidget spinners. Voice to text technology, right? Electric toothbrushes were made back, I think, in the 40s, either the 40s or 50s, because they wanted, whoever invented them wanted to give people with limited mobility the ability to clean their teeth better, right? Typewriters and keyboards were, that was back years ago typewriter was started by a woman who was blind. I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is okay to ask, but what is your definition, and how can employers improve their inclusion of this community? And I ask this because I work with leaders, and sometimes I, really don't feel that it's being really put part of their culture.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm asked that question a lot because I used to work in this space. But the first question I tell them, the first answer I give to employers when I'm asked that question is they have to sort of get invested in the education of knowing what the soft spots are. So what I mean by that is I used to be an ambassador for a project for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce called the Discoverability Network, which was an online job matching portal for folks with disabilities and employers to get connected. And the first thing the tagline for the project was seize the chance to advance your business. So the first thing I always tell employers is engage in the process of education and also practice. I always tell people that you make time for the things in life, like you prioritize what is important to you. So the first thing I tell employers is prioritize the action of inclusion, and it has to go beyond what's at the end of a job description, right? So prioritize the action of inclusion, and then actually put action steps into place to practice a culture of inclusion, because it is a learned behavior, but it's also something that has to be something that is wanted to be learned, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, totally helpful.
That's called turning the tables on the interviewer, right?
Well, I was curious. I figured I had this opportunity, so I wanted to hear what you had to say. Thank you so much for indulging that.
Yeah, was that helpful for you?
Absolutely. Trust me, I have clients this afternoon, and I will be bringing it up.
Absolutely. When I send you this, you can use my clip as an answer, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. That's great.
So, yeah, absolutely. So, Barbara, I'm curious to ask you, since you work work with women in today's workplace culture, what's the one thing that you hear from women that they want to sort of change the narrative and the discussion around when it comes to equality in the workplace for women?
You know, they really don't want to be talked down to. They want to be looked at. They don't want to be told that they are supposed to behave like a man. A lot of people, women included, think that they have to behave like a man in order to be successful, and they don't. And this is one of the things that, particularly when a lot of women lead with masculine energy, it's like, if that is something that's comfortable to you, and if that is something that comes naturally to you, that's great. But let's bring in the feminine energy. And I don't mean, wearing pink and, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about really getting to know who you are and using both masculine and feminine energy together. But women want to be looked upon as equals. It isn't that someone who's a CEO and is a female, oh, wow, she must be special. Women do this all the time. We want, they just want to be looked at as equal, paid equally for the same job, valued equally as someone else. Our patriarchal society has been going on for a really long time, and we've made a lot of great strides, but boy, there is a lot of deep-seated beliefs and cultural things that have to change. And so we just keep going, and, double standards, women can work in the workforce, but then they have to come home and they have to do everything around the house and do the kids and all of this stuff. Yeah, no. And so we've got to just support equal for equal. I have a client right now who's got a really huge job, and she feels guilty because her husband does most of the stuff with the kids. And I'm like, why are you feeling guilty? If we reversed it and we had a CEO, male CEO, he has a wife at home who this is how they've decided their marriage is going to go. He takes care of all of this. She takes care of the stuff at home and makes his life easy. The roles are reversed, but the woman is feeling guilty because society says you should be able to do everything. And that's got to stop.
Yeah, and one of the questions that I was fascinated to ask you, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, and I started it about 2.5 years ago, but one of the reasons I wanted to start it was I wanted to bring together experts to sort of bridge the divide of unity. When you turn on the news today, Barbara, you can be almost inundated with all the negative stuff that's happening in the world. So I'm curious to ask you, because of your high energy and experience, what do you think is the key to sort of bridging the gaps of unity and making sure that we live a more unified and hopeful existence?
Well, I think that, and this may sound really cheesy, but understanding, sometimes we hear this in politics, we are more alike than we are different. And I think this need for power and winning has to be set aside. I mean, I am so enjoying this conversation that you and I are having, and you and I are so different in so many ways. But here's the thing, you and I are both human beings. That's the commonality. We are human beings. We are having this human experience on this earth. And if we can set aside looking for the differences and start to find some commonalities, and instead of looking at differences as a negative, how about if we look at differences as something that's incredibly interesting? And this is why I want to get to know you. And how can your differences enhance my life, and vice versa? And having a collaborative energy in that, instead of this is you and you're wrong, I'm right, I have to win. I mean, our world is so separate. Everybody, it's so divisive. I mean, just, look at what's happened just now in England with their prime minister. It's everywhere. And we have to be looking at, if we want to really have that heightened life, that best life, that wonderful experience, we've got to start including people and looking at differences as a plus rather than a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And Barbara, tell me, what do you think is the key to establishing sustainable consistency in business?
Well, I talk a lot about mindset. I'm a coach. I'm a mindset coach. So, I think the first place is to decide that you're going to be consistent in whatever it is that you want to be consistent is. First and foremost, thought patterns. When people try to lose weight, they're all gung-ho at the beginning, and then, it's like at the beginning of the year, right? The gyms are full, but then by February, it's crickets. Well, people get into their old habits of thinking, and that supports old patterns of behavior. So we have to really look at, how important is this to me to be consistent in my business? What is your why? Why are you doing this? Really ask yourself that again and again. And why is that important? And why is that important? And get to the place where you feel emotion, where it's like, if I didn't do this, I wouldn't know what else to do with my life, right? It's got to be super personal and important. It can't just be about money or success, because those are very empty. And then you decide, you know what, no matter how I'm feeling, no matter what's happening with me, this is what I'm doing. And I will take steps every single day. And practicing those new thoughts. This sounds very simplistic, and I realize that, but it's not always easy because our brains like to go back to those old patterns of thinking. So decide and then make the commitment to yourself. And I'm not talking about perfection, I'm talking about holding yourself accountable to what your goals are, to what you say you want, to your why. Why are you doing this, right? Too many people don't realize their dreams because they give up on themselves. They give up on it and they convince themselves they're not possible. The real you inside that has that dream in the first place, that wanted to be in business in the first place, it never would have even crossed your mind if it weren't supposed to happen.
You just gave me the title to this podcast. I'm going to title it, What is Your Why? So thank you for that.
That's great. That's great.
So, Barbara, they tell me that your kryptonite is dark chocolate, my friend. So, when you're not working and indulging in chocolate, what do you like to do for fun, and why is chocolate your weakness?
I love that. That's so funny. Yes, dark chocolate. And I'm telling you, I'm a foodie, but not like in the gourmet, I'm sorry, Michelin restaurants. I think the food is beautiful in art, but I'm not somebody who can appreciate that. I just love really good food. I was just recently in Italy, and the food there I think Italian food is fabulous. And I had the opportunity to eat so much lovely, flavorful pizza and pasta. And let me tell you, the dark chocolate there is so good. But it has to be really good. None of the 65% sweet stuff. It's got to be bitter, like, 85%. But I love to travel. I love to see new places. I love to connect with people. And why do you live here? What is so great about this? Show me around, If you want a great place to have chocolate, in Asheville, North Carolina, there's a place called the French Broad Chocolatier. And I'm telling you, they have desserts, wines, coffees, chocolates, all these things. My husband has shipped chocolates from that place to me for gifts. And I'm telling you, it is one of the best places. But I like to have fun and I like to connect with people. So when I travel around, I'm the person in the store that's talking to the owner and saying, how long have you been in business? And what's your favorite thing about owning this? And, if I love where I am, I just did this in Positano. I loved this one store. I thought they were lovely. They had great things. I was bringing people in off the street. And he loved me. So I just like to make connections wherever I go. And if there's chocolate involved, my friend, what a bonus.
Yeah, I always tell people that there's a power to authentic human connection, isn't there?
Yeah, totally. That's why I think I'm drawn to cultures where food is so important. And I know, health-wise, we're not supposed to say food is love, but I'm telling you, there's so much love put into food. Certain cultures, they do that, right? And, in my house, Thanksgiving, we just have a gajillion number of dishes. And I love that day because it's all about food, family, and fun.
Well,
It's not about gifts and shopping and everything else. It's about gratitude and coming together, right? I love that.
absolutely. And as I told you at the beginning of this, Barbara, so I live in Canada, but I also have American family. So I get to do Turkey Day twice a year, and I never complain, right? I pack about 10 extra pounds of apple pie on every year, but that's okay.
It is. It's so worth it.
That's what always being active is for, right?
Exactly.
If you're active all the time, you can afford to have some guilty pleasures, right?
You can have that second or third piece of pie, my friend.
That's exactly right. I'm going to tell my mom the next time I want one. I'll tell her that Barbara said it's okay. Okay.
Perfect.
So, Barbara, my final question for you this afternoon has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
Oh, wow. What a question. Wow. Now you're going to make me emotional, Kevin. Well, personally, I think it's an easy one. I always wanted to be a mom ever since I was a little kid, and I am fortunate enough to have 3 kids, and they are all so different and amazing in their own way, and I absolutely love them more than life itself. And it's not about their accomplishments, it's about who they really are as people. I love my friends dearly. I don't have, I know a lot of people, but my core group is quite small, and I just love that. And I think for my personal legacy, maybe it's that quote from Maya Angelou comes up, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I guess I want my personal legacy to be about that and about how much love that I have for them. Professionally, I think, this sounds kind of cheesy again, but it's kind of along the same lines. I mean, it has taken me most of my life to get to a place where I can truthfully say that I love myself. I love everything about myself. I love who I am. I love how I look as I age even. I love how I show up. I love my sense of humor. I love that I can be quirky. I want my clients to have that same thing, because I think at the core of our humanness, Kevin, is we all want the same thing. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. And bottom line, we all want to be loved. And I think that starts within ourselves. So I see my clients, I hear my clients, and I love them and believe in them until they can love and believe in themselves. And man, if I can do that for people every single day, what else is there?
Yeah, and life is all about paying it forward, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Barbara, tell me, finally, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, they can find me on my website, Churchill.com, barbarachurchill.com, Churchill. They can find me on LinkedIn, and they can find me on Instagram. Those are where I hang out. So I would love to chat with whoever, and if they have questions, they can certainly reach out to me there.
Well, Barbara, I certainly enjoyed this international conversation this afternoon, all about leadership, the imposter syndrome, and everything in between. Your work in the space of personal development is most appreciated, and I sincerely want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It was totally my pleasure.